May God bless your day and your entire week as you join us for today's deep dive. We have a genuinely fascinating journey ahead of us today.
Oh, we absolutely do.
Yeah, we are stepping back in time roughly 2,000 years to look at a deeply passionate, honestly highly charged letter. Specifically, we're examining chapter 3 of the Apostle Paul's letter to the Galatians, and we're going to be utilizing the historical context and, the theological insights from the Holman and NWA study Bibles to kind of unpack this.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to realize right up front that when you read this text, you aren't looking at some, dusty, abstract theological treatise.
Right, right.
It's not academic. You are reading a live, urgent correspondence. It's from a man who is actively trying to put out a massive philosophical fire in a community he cares deeply about.
Yeah,
I mean, the stakes, in his mind, are absolute life and death.
completely. And the core tension we are exploring today is something that, well, it resonates just as strongly for you listening right now as it did in the ancient Mediterranean world.
Oh, for sure.
It's this intense, age-old clash between, on one hand, trying to earn your worth through strict rule-keeping versus simply resting in faith. We're going to look at how this one idea, relying on a promise rather than a checklist, completely dismantled the rigid social barriers of the ancient world.
Yeah, and Paul does not ease into this topic with pleasantries either.
No, he really doesn't.
He comes out swinging. He is writing to a group of early churches in the region of Galatia, and he is just bewildered by this sudden shift in their behavior.
Right. If you were visualizing this, imagine Paul pacing back and forth in a room, dictating this letter, and he's just brimming with frustration.
Oh, you can feel it in the text.
You really can. He actually starts chapter 3 by calling his readers foolish, or, in some translations it says bewitched.
Yeah, bewitched is such a strong word.
It is. He literally asks them, who has cast a spell on you? Like, what are you doing?
Well, to understand that level of frustration, you really have to look at the timeline of the Galatians' spiritual journey.
Okay, set the stage for us.
So the study notes highlight that these people started out their new life relying entirely on the Spirit, right? And on faith in Christ. That was their foundation from day one.
Right.
But recently, they pivoted. They are now trying to reach spiritual maturity or, perfection through human effort and strict adherence to the Mosaic law.
Ah, gotcha.
And Paul refers to this human effort as, quote, the flesh.
Right, and I actually want to pause on that term, the flesh, because if you aren't familiar with first century theological language, that sounds incredibly strange.
Right.
It sounds like literal skin and bone or, maybe something out of a horror movie. But in plain English, based on the context here, Paul is really talking about relying on our own human muscle.
Exactly.
It's our own sheer effort and willpower to achieve spiritual perfection rather than, well, relying on God's Spirit.
That is the crucial distinction, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Paul is watching them trade a system based on divine grace for a system based on grueling human performance.
Which, it makes absolutely no sense when you think about it practically.
No, it really doesn't.
Okay, imagine starting a cross-country road trip, right? And you have a perfect satellite-guided GPS system.
Okay, I like where this is going.
That GPS represents faith. It's telling you exactly where to turn. It's recalculating for traffic. It operates on a higher network that you literally don't have to manage at all.
Right, it's doing the heavy lifting.
Exactly. But halfway to your destination, you suddenly panic.
As we do.
Right? So you turn off the glowing screen, you pull over, and you try to navigate a major chaotic city using a crumpled, outdated 1990s paper map.
Oh, man.
That paper map is the law. Why in the world would you go backward to a less effective, purely manual system when you already have the ultimate guide?
It's a great analogy. And the psychology behind that panic is, well, it's incredibly human.
Yeah, I suppose so.
We have to look at the historical context, specifically a group the study notes refer to as the Judaizers.
Okay, the Judaizers.
Yeah, these were individuals who came into the Galatian churches and began teaching that a purely faith-based system was just, well, too loose.
Too easy, maybe.
Yeah, it felt abstract, ungrounded, and, frankly, risky to them.
We do love a metric, right?
Oh, human beings crave something we can measure and track.
We really do. If someone tells me I'm accepted just by believing a promise, a part of my brain immediately feels suspicious. Like, what's the catch? We want a checklist so we can point to our own effort and validate our status.
Exactly. And the Judaizers offered that exact comfort zone.
Ah, the checklist.
Right. They brought the Mosaic law to the table. We're talking tangible, physical rules
Uh-huh.
that advocated for strict dietary restrictions, the observance of specific festival days, and the physical permanent act of circumcision.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, they were basically giving the Galatians a checklist so they could say, look, I did the things, I have the physical markers, I am officially in the club.
Right.
The argument was that faith in Christ was, a nice starting point, but true justification required you to follow these ancient measurable rules.
So they are taking an incredibly heavy burden of performance and just dropping it right onto the shoulders of these new believers.
Yeah, exactly.
But Paul's response, what I love is that he doesn't just get bogged down in arguing about, like, which specific rules to follow.
No, he doesn't.
He bypasses their entire premise by going straight to the historical founder of their faith. He goes to Abraham.
Yeah, Paul uses Abraham to completely dismantle the Judaizers' argument. It's brilliant.
How so?
Well, the Judaizers insist that keeping the law of Moses is a prerequisite for justification, right?
Right.
But Paul points out a massive chronological problem with that theory. According to the text in Genesis, Abraham was justified by faith simply because he believed God.
Okay.
And this event happened centuries before the law of Moses even existed.
Oh, wow. So he is exposing a massive flaw in their logic right there.
Completely.
I mean, the father of the faith, the guy this whole religious structure is built upon, he didn't have a single dietary restriction or, a stone tablet of commandments.
Got one.
He just had a promise, and he trusted it.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Paul explicitly connects Abraham's justification to the unconditional covenant God made with him.
Unconditional being the key word there.
Yes. God promised that all nations would be blessed through him. And that blessing is available to everyone, not through adopting a strict legal code, but through the exact same mechanism Abraham used.
Which was just faith.
Which was simply trusting the promise, yes.
Okay, but this brings up a massive friction point for me, and I have to imagine Paul's original readers were thinking the exact same thing.
Oh, I'm sure they were. What's the friction?
Well, if faith was always the plan, right, from Abraham onward, and if it was completely sufficient for him, why did the law of Moses ever enter the picture at all? Did God just, change his mind halfway through history and decide, actually, let's make this incredibly difficult for everyone?
Right. Well, Paul anticipates that exact skepticism. The study sources give us a very specific timeline to address this. The law of Moses was introduced 430 years after God made his promise to Abraham.
Okay, wait, 430 years.
430 years.
If the promise was unconditional, the arrival of the law 430 years later feels like a huge bait and switch.
It does feel that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, let's look at this in modern legal terms. If I sign an ironclad contract with you today, let's say a last will and testament, legally binding and ratified,
Okay, yeah.
you can't just show up 4 centuries later with a bunch of new fine print that voids our original deal. I mean, the original promise has to stand, right?
Exactly. And Paul uses that very same legal logic. He argues that even in human terms, once a covenant or a will is ratified, no one can just annul it or suddenly tack on new conditions.
Right. That would be illegal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So God's promise to Abraham was a unilateral covenant. That means God made the promise and took 100% of the responsibility for fulfilling it.
Wow. Okay.
It wasn't dependent on Abraham maintaining a flawless behavioral record.
And there is also a very specific detail the notes mention about the wording of that promise, right? Regarding the word seed.
Yes. The original promise in Genesis was made to Abraham and his seed. Paul zeroes in on the fact that the word is singular, not plural.
Ah, okay, so it's not seeds, plural.
Right. The text argues that this singular seed was always a direct prophetic arrow pointing to Christ.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, the promise was an unbroken line from Abraham to Christ, operating entirely on faith and God's unconditional grace.
But then Moses comes down the mountain with the law, and, well, Paul uses some pretty intense, honestly terrifying language to describe it. He says the law actually brings a curse.
He does. Because, unlike the unconditional promise made to Abraham, the law of Moses was a conditional covenant.
Conditional meaning it depended on us.
Yes. It demanded absolute, unyielding perfection in human obedience. The text actually quotes the Old Testament, saying, "Cursed is everyone who does not continue to do everything written in the book of the law."
Everything.
Everything. And since human nature makes us incapable of perfect obedience, breaking even one rule means you have shattered the standard of perfection.
Oh.
So, relying on the law for your salvation essentially guarantees you will end up under a curse, simply because you will inevitably fail.
Hold on. You're telling me God deliberately gave humanity a law that he knew was completely impossible for us to keep,
That's what the text implies, yes.
essentially setting us up to fail and be cursed. I mean, that sounds incredibly harsh. Why would a loving God do something that seems so, I don't know, counterproductive?
Right. And that is the most critical question of this entire text. To answer it, we really have to look at how Christ interacts with that curse.
Okay, walk me through that.
The text explains that Christ rescued humanity from this curse by taking it upon himself. The specific phrasing Paul uses is that Christ became a curse for us by being hung on a tree.
Which is a clear reference to the crucifixion.
Exactly. He absorbed the ultimate penalty of the broken law. And this allowed the original blessing of Abraham, that unconditional promise of grace we talked about, to flow freely to everyone through faith, just completely bypassing the curse entirely.
Wow. Okay, so the law didn't replace the promise. It operated on, like, a parallel track.
Precisely.
But, your explanation still leaves a burning question unanswered for me.
Okay, what is it?
If the law doesn't save us, and God knew it wouldn't save us, and it actually brings a curse by constantly highlighting our failures, was it a mistake? I mean, what was its actual practical job for those 430 years and beyond?
That's a great question. Paul answers this by stating the law was added because of transgressions, until the seed, meaning Christ, had come.
Okay.
And to describe the law's specific function, the text uses a really vivid Greek word, pedagogos.
Yes, pedagogos. The study notes spend a significant amount of time unpacking this word, and I know in English it frequently gets translated as guardian or tutor.
Right, those are the common translations.
But that translation creates a very misleading image in our modern minds, doesn't it? I mean, we picture a gentle, kindly professor with elbow patches patiently helping a student with their math homework.
Right, like a friendly mentor.
Yeah, exactly. But that is absolutely not what a first-century reader would picture.
Not at all. In the ancient Greco-Roman world, a pedagogos was typically a strict servant, or honestly often a slave, owned by a wealthy household.
Okay, so a very different dynamic.
Completely different. Their specific assignment was the master's child. They would escort the child to school, carry their belongings, and most importantly, discipline them and keep them strictly out of trouble until they reached legal adulthood.
So they were basically ancient enforcers.
Pretty much. I mean, they used a rod for physical discipline that kept the child locked up, restricted, and under constant, unyielding surveillance.
Wow, okay.
The role was entirely defined by restriction and protective custody, not by nurturing intellectual education.
Right.
So Paul is arguing that the law acted as this strict pedagogos for humanity. Its job was to reveal our sin, to show us our total inability to meet God's standard on our own, and to keep us confined in a state of protective custody until the real solution, Christ, arrived on the scene.
Let's translate that into something a parent today would instantly recognize.
Oh, please do.
A baby gate.
Yes.
If you have toddlers, you know that a baby gate is incredibly restrictive. You put it at the top of the stairs, you bolt it across the doorway to the kitchen. It limits the child's freedom completely.
Oh, absolutely.
But it serves a vital, literally life-saving purpose. It keeps the toddler from wandering out the front door into traffic or falling headfirst down a flight of stairs.
Right.
It establishes rigid boundaries because the child simply isn't mature enough to navigate the dangers of the house on their own.
That is a perfect analogy. The baby gate doesn't teach the child the mechanics of how to walk perfectly.
No, not at all.
It just preserves them until they are old enough to understand the rules of the house internally. The law functions similarly. It managed behavior and highlighted danger, but it fundamentally couldn't transform the heart.
And the crucial part of this analogy is that the whole point of growing up is that eventually, the baby gates must come down.
Yes.
You don't keep a 25-year-old locked behind a plastic gate in the living room. If you do, something has gone terribly, terribly wrong with their development.
Right, exactly. And the text clarifies that once faith in Christ arrived, the era of the pedagogos ended.
The baby gates come down.
The baby gates are dismantled because the child has reached full legal adulthood and received the inheritance. Through faith, believers transition from being heavily supervised, restricted children to full-fledged adopted heirs of God.
And taking down that baby gate didn't just change a person's private, internal spiritual life, right? It had massive, explosive implications for how society functions.
Oh, huge implications.
I really want to look at what spiritual adulthood actually looks like in practice when an entire community is justified by faith instead of a strict set of rules.
Well, it looks like radical, unprecedented equality. And this brings us to Galatians 3.28, which is arguably one of the most famous and culturally significant verses in the entire letter.
Okay, let's hear it.
Paul writes, "There is no Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female, since you are all one in Christ Jesus."
You know, those words might sound somewhat standard or even expected to modern ears because we're so accustomed to hearing about equality. But in the context of the ancient Roman Empire, that statement is practically an earthquake.
It really is. The study notes provide profound historical context for just how shocking this would have been.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the law of Moses inherently created strict divisions. By its very nature as a physical boundary marker, it erected a massive wall between Jew and Gentile.
Right.
Furthermore, the broader society of the time was heavily stratified. I mean, the Roman economy relied entirely on the division between slaves and free citizens.
Of course.
And there was a vast systemic power imbalance between men and women. The ancient world operated strictly on hierarchies of superiority and inferiority.
So Paul is basically taking a sledgehammer to the very foundation of how their society organized human value.
He absolutely is. He uses the imagery of baptism, stating that believers have clothed themselves in Christ.
Clothed themselves.
Yes. And when an individual is clothed in Christ, those ancient rigid walls are rendered entirely irrelevant regarding their standing before God and their status within the community of faith.
Wow.
Now, the study notes are careful to clarify that Paul isn't erasing biological gender or cultural ethnicity.
Right. People still retain their unique identities.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But he is utterly destroying any hierarchy of value. No group of people, social class, or gender can be exalted above another when everyone's worth is derived from the exact same source.
To put this in a modern context for you listening, imagine walking into a high-stakes corporate boardroom today.
Okay, picture it.
Sitting at the table is a billionaire tech CEO, a first-year unpaid intern, a single mother working 3 jobs, and individuals from wildly different cultural backgrounds and nationalities.
Right.
Not only are they all seated at the exact same table, but they are given the exact same honor, the exact same voice, and promised the exact same massive inheritance. There is no VIP section. There is no head of the table. That is the radical barrier-breaking equality Paul is describing here.
It is, and it highlights perfectly why the Judaizers' insistence on going back to the law was so incredibly dangerous in Paul's eyes.
Because it rebuilt the walls?
Exactly.
Right.
The law rebuilt the VIP section. It reconstructed the walls of division by saying, you are only truly acceptable and valuable if you observe these specific cultural and physical markers.
Right, right.
Or faith in the promise levels the playing field entirely. If justification comes solely through trusting the promise of Christ, then everyone comes through the exact same door on the exact same terms.
Man, it is a profound transition from the exhausting, anxiety-inducing effort of rule-keeping to absolute freedom and rest.
It really is.
Let's kind of recap the journey we've taken on this deep dive today.
Let's do it.
We started by looking at Paul's absolute bewilderment, really his sheer panic that anyone would trade the freedom of faith for the heavy burden of trying to earn their salvation. We looked at the absurdity of trading that perfect, real-time GPS for a ripped-up paper map, just because the map gives us the illusion of control.
The 1990s paper map.
Yes, exactly. And we explored how the original promise to Abraham was an unbreakable unilateral covenant, much like a last will and testament.
And we also uncovered the often misunderstood role of the law, right?
Right.
Coming 430 years later, it didn't void that original promise, but it acted as a strict babysitter, a pedagogos, revealing our flaws and keeping humanity in protective custody until Christ arrived to absorb the curse of our inevitable failure.
And we saw that the ultimate result of Christ's arrival was the dismantling of those baby gates.
Yes.
Leading to an entirely new community where ancient divisions of race, class, and gender were replaced by a profound radical equality. It honestly changes everything about how you view yourself and how you view the person sitting next to you.
It changes everything.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on long after this audio stops playing.
Yeah, as you go about your day, consider this. If the Apostle Paul were writing a letter specifically to you today, what modern laws would he call out?
Ooh, that's a good question.
What self-improvement checklists, career milestones, or societal labels would he say you are secretly relying on to justify your worth? Are you trusting in your financial success, your moral track record, or how your peers perceive you, instead of simply resting in the unconditional promise that you are already an heir?
Wow. That is a profound question to carry with you this week. We want to thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. God blesses all the listeners.